I wanted to talk about our love affair with stone. For me, I think for both of us, it really began around 40 years ago in 1983 when I had a chance to go to Rome on a fellowship and Billie joined me. What I thought I would be studying, which was history, actually became material. And it became a sort of sense of an appreciation of the weight of history, of the power of history, and of durable marks on the earth. So the huge walls that surround Rome were part of that, largely made of brick, then clad in concrete, and then clad in stone. The Pantheon, which was a touchstone for us, and came back from there with a very different idea. So plaster casts that we did together and drawings we did together, they're all the same size, but they're trying to find something that is specific to place, and they're not obviously about history.
One of the earlier projects, and it was certainly as much a landscape project as anything else, was a swimming pool on an island, and Todd and I saw the stone that was refused by Philip Johnson for the AT&T project.
The whole path into it was lined with blocks, and I thought, these are amazing. They're the size of a car practically. And I asked naively about the stone and what these were, and I was told they were grout. And then was told that these were blocks that Philip Johnson had rejected in selecting stone for the AT&T building. And so went back to the owner and said, I'd like to use these stones and use as much of the stone as possible. And subsequently, the owner indulged my fantasy, and we built of Stony Creek. We even made concrete of the stone.
But this idea of stone that may have been cut for something else, and how we might be able to reuse it, is something that's also continued to happen in our work. An appreciation for a sort of more pure, unpolished quality of stone, of this granite.
And also imperfect stone. If the stone is structurally perfect, why should it be rejected? So the idea of defects being not defects at all, but rather adding character came forward. When we later worked out at close to the Salk Institute, we had to think of Louis Kahn and his use of travertine, and then realized that we shouldn't copy Kahn, and then explored American travertine, and to understand later, Kahn was very interested in. This is a Texas fossil stone, and we used that on a project in La Jolla, and used it in thick blocks, visited the quarries, as we always do, and the stone journey was on.
I think one of the things that we appreciate is, as Todd said, imperfection, and then seeing the very, very special marks that stone can have in it. So we were working on a project in Chicago, and we started actually looking at different limestones and then looking at ashlar, but it was a very sort of messy look. And we found a limestone which has essentially been used for garden work, but had many different colors. So the thought of using stone like very elongated bricks led to this idea for cladding this building, the Logan Center at the University of Chicago.
Well, one of the reasons we rejected Indiana limestone there was that they no longer were really enjoying the imperfect stones that they had used at the beginning of the 20th century and earlier from the quarry. In fact, they were always ever more refined sort of layers of stone. And choosing the right layer seemed complex. So in fact, in this stone that came from quarries in Missouri, as Billie described, we actually chose different colors to ultimately give the effect of it having a richness. That same idea of bars of stone, we then came back and used on a house in Long Island. And we chose a stone from Italy that came not far from Valls, but had a granulation. Went to the quarry there and saw the whole town was made of it, Val Malenko, and realized that it was an ordinary gray stone and in many ways looked almost like wood siding. So we very much enjoyed the ambiguity of this seeming like weathered wood, perhaps being also stone.
We were lucky enough to work in India, where craft is still very, very much alive, and visiting the incredible stone buildings in Jaisalmer, which were made out of a sandstone, we realized that there are huge possibilities of stone and stone working. So then going from something that became maybe was at first as large as we could get. We looked at bricks, and now we're looking at trying to use stone in a decorative way. And it's a combination of still handcraft and also a water jet technology, which allowed us to make these a kind of version of a traditional jali, which is the sandstone screens that were used in India.
Well, this is a large campus, an IT campus, and we used two different kinds of stone. One was cashmere white, which we determined actually came from Madurai, which is in the south of India. And then, as Billy says, this dolper stone, which comes from the northwest of India. And very different, soft when it comes out of the ground, and then easy to carve. From there, we had a chance to work in Hong Kong. Thought we would use local stone in Hong Kong, but had a chance also to look at some of the stones in China, and we were thinking about kind of traditional use of stones in Chinese culture, which is a picture stone.
Well, in Chinese furniture, often these stones are inset into chairs and used as the backs of chairs, and each stone is actually a painting.
That was a journey to mainland China and to some of the great stone fairs where we were blown away. Another project more recently is our embassy in Mexico City, a U.S. embassy under construction. We had the fantasy that we could get the stone from that would feel like it was both American and of Mexico, and so explored stones both in Mexico and in the southwest of the United States. The contractor chose a stone which comes from India. It's actually a very beautiful stone and has a granulation. We used a great deal of that, and are emphasizing the granulation of the stone, the colors of the stone. So it creates a kind of mural, a lively mural, which is so prevalent in Mexican culture.
And when we were visiting Bennington, Vermont, we saw the beautiful marble pathways, which were all sort of leftover pieces from the marble quarries which had gone defunct. We were taken to visit, I guess, a kind of elephant's graveyard, where the owner had bought the marble supply of a number of different quarries that had shut down over the years. And we saw buildings there that were made of many different kinds of marble.
Because the marble industry had been such a big one in Vermont, this small fabricator was primarily fabricating pieces for either tombstones or for repair of buildings in the nation's capitals that had used some of that same stone. It was said we'd take any of the number of different stones that came from different quarries, and if we could use a system that would make them inexpensive to lay, we could set them up much like brick. Very much loved this, laying it out on a gym floor outside of Rutland.
Buildings were very simple, so they could lay out the wall. I mean, this was both to dry out the stone, but also to make sure the adjustment between different colors was working. And along the way, one of the great things about visiting quarries is seeing the character of the stone as it's been cut. So we tried to take this idea of the picture stone and reuse it where really it's the natural sort of act of cutting, the labor of cutting that is showcased.
The original Barnes project was made of French limestone. For a variety of reasons, cost and so on, we couldn't use that, and ultimately explored a number of different stones and chose a stone ultimately that came from the Negev.
So we went to Jerusalem, and we went to the place where they're taking the stone out of the earth, and we were also able to visit a place where they were working the stone.
In the end, created a kind of a quilt for the building using the stone in different kinds of finishes that we were able to discover simply by sitting with those who were fabricating the stone.
The Obama Presidential Center. The stone is actually a carved rock that we bought in Ethiopia, but it continued to stay with us as a kind of talisman for this idea of making a tower out of stone.
We were told it'd be good if we could use a stone from the United States. We understood that. And then we were further told that because of marble failures in Chicago, we were told we needed to make it of granite. And so explored granite. Ultimately have selected, after looking at 3 granites from different places within the United States, not terribly far away, we chose the one that we will be working with, which is a tapestry and a kittledge, I guess, in quarries owned by Tony Ramos. We're in the middle of exploring that. We thought about carving letters of stone, and we thought about creating textures of stone to enliven the facade.
So one of the things we have learned through our, as Todd calls it, the love affair with stone is that everything that we know comes from the people who own the quarries and the people who actually work the stone. So just looking at this one detail where we were trying to make a kind of sense of fins on the side of the building, we first looked at stone that had been cut by machine, and in order to make it feel rougher and more handmade, we went and worked with these people cutting the stone by hand.
In these, 40 years we've been working, we probably only made no more than 60 buildings, but I'd say a large percentage of them are using stone. And it's been just an incredible experience to grow and to journey through the world and the possibilities of stone. And we feel we're just right at the tip of an amazing iceberg. Mother Earth has so much to give us, and we have so much to give back to her. Thank you.